You know Medusa. The snakes. The stare that turns men to stone. The monster a hero was sent to kill. And maybe you know the other version. A beautiful woman, assaulted in a temple, punished by a goddess for a crime that was done to her. Here is what almost no one tells you. That second Medusa, the victim, is not the original. In the oldest layer of the evidence, written centuries earlier, there is no temple, no assault, no punishment. There is barely a story at all. There is only a face, a terrifying face, hung on a shield. So somewhere across the centuries, someone gave that face a name and a wound. This is Pantheon X. We do not retell the myth, we investigate it. Tonight, one question. Who built the Medusa you think you know? And what were they really building? Start where most people start, because it is the version that moves us. A young woman named Medusa. Mortal, beautiful, famous for her hair, serving in the temple of the goddess of wisdom and war, Athena. The god of the sea wants her. And in the temple itself, the one place that should have been, but the punishment does not land on him. The goddess, enraged that her sanctuary has been defiled, turns on the woman. She twists the hair everyone praised into serpents and makes her gaze a weapon. The admired priestess becomes the thing the world will fear. It lands hard in our century. A woman is assaulted by a powerful man, and the institution that should have protected her punishes her instead, while he walks away untouched. That is the Medusa, a lot of people now call the truest one. But an investigation has to ask one question first. Where does this version, because it has an author and a date, and both of them change everything. Go back as far as the written record reaches, to Homer, the oldest Greek poetry we have. And something is missing. No priestess, no temple, not even a full story. There is just a head. In the Iliad, the war goddess goes into battle with the head of the Gorgon fixed on her shield, an emblem of pure terror. In the Odyssey, the hero among the dead fears one thing above all, that the head might rise up out of the dark. That is the oldest Medusa. Not a woman, not a victim. A severed face so frightening that gods carried it as a weapon. Hold on to that. The head comes first. The woman comes much, much later. The first time anyone gives that face a family is a poem by Hesiod, 700 years before the version you heard at the start. And listen to how little of the famous story is there. Medusa is not a lone priestess. She is one of 3 sisters, monsters at the edge of the world. Her 2 sisters never die. Medusa alone is mortal. That is her whole tragedy in the oldest telling. Not that she was wronged, that she could be killed. The sea god is here too. But watch how Hesiod tells it. The god lay with her in a soft meadow among spring flowers. No temple, no goddess, no rage, no curse, no transformation. She is already a Gorgon when he finds her. And when the hero takes her head, something is born from her body in the same instant she dies. A winged horse, Pegasus, and a golden warrior, the children of that meadow. A monster who becomes a mother at the moment of her death. There is no lesson about justice. There is no victim. She is a place a hero goes to prove himself. Centuries later, a Greek handbook lays out the full hero's quest. The winged sandals, the cap of invisibility, the polished shield he uses as a mirror so he can strike her without ever meeting her eyes. He takes the head, uses it as a weapon, and gives it to the war goddess who fixes it onto her shield. Exactly where Homer first showed it to us centuries before. The story ends by putting the head back where the evidence began. But here is the detail that breaks the neat picture. Even that same handbook says Medusa was killed for daring to compare her beauty to the goddess's own. Not a rape, a rivalry. Already before Ovid, the tradition could not agree on why she had to die, and it runs deeper. To the poet Pindar, the most important thing about Medusa was the sound her sisters made when she died, a single unbearable cry which Athena copied into the very first music ever played on the flute. Her scream becomes a song. So before we ever reach the famous story, the sources hold three different Medusas at once: a terror that wards off death, a mortal mother in a meadow, the origin of music. None of them is the woman in the temple. She has still not been invented. Someone is about to. The victim is born in Rome. Around the year 8 of our era, a Roman poet named Ovid writes a vast work about transformation, and he does something no surviving Greek source had done. He gives Medusa a before. She was once famous for her beauty. The sea god violates her in the temple. The goddess, offended, changes her hair to snakes. Ovid is the source of the version the modern world adopted. Not Greece. Rome. 700 years downstream of Hesiod. Why would Ovid invent that? His whole poem is gods who desire mortals and take them, and more. In Ovid, Medusa is not the exception. She is the pattern. It is tempting to make Ovid a hero, secretly protesting injustice. We cannot read his mind. He wrote under an emperor who policed Roman morals and later exiled him to the edge of the empire. Whether the passage was protest, the poem does not say. What we can say is stronger. The injustice is right there on the surface. A goddess punishing a woman for a god's crime. Ovid did not have to add one word of outrage. He just had to let you see it. And he was not the only one rewriting her. One made her a real Libyan queen, defeated in a real war. Another buried her head under a Greek city like any mortals. Each one was sure they had found the real woman under the monster. Which leaves the hardest question. If the victim was invented, and the queen was invented, then was the monster ever the truth either? Or has Medusa always been a blank that every age fills with its own fear? To answer that, go back to the one thing that never changed. The face. Long before Medusa had a family or a wound, that wide, glaring front on temples, over doorways, on armor. Scholars call it the Gorgonian, and it was not a villain, it was protection. To guard against a terrible thing, you mount an image even more terrible, staring outward, daring evil closer. The face that supposedly kills was, to the people who carved it, the face that keeps you safe. Which raises a question scholars still argue and have never settled. Which came first? The monster in the story, or the mask on the wall? Did a myth grow up to explain a frightening face? Or did a frightening myth get nailed up? And watch what time does to that face. The earliest version is deliberately hideous. But century by century, Greek artists soften it, until the monster becomes a beautiful woman with a strange, sorrowful calm, snakes still in her hair, but human grief in her eyes. And notice where the head always ends up. On the shoulder of the war goddess. The hero does not destroy Medusa's power. He harvests it. Even as a trophy, she is still doing the oldest job that face ever had. That is the arc of a guardian the story could never decide how to feel about. Which is why she will not stay still. Step out of the ancient world, and Medusa is everywhere, still being rewritten. A fashion house takes her head as its emblem, turning a warning into a mark of glamour, the face you cannot look away from. The oldest logic of the Gorgonian, 3,000 years later. And then, the reversal. In 2009, an artist sculpts Medusa standing tall, holding a blade, no longer the hunted. Then, in 2020, in a reckoning over sexual violence, the public seizes it and turns it into a symbol for survivors. Here is the part that matters, and it is documented. The artist has said he did not make it as a feminist statement at all. The meaning was added by the people who needed it. We did to that statue exactly what Ovid did to the ancient monster. Survivor, monster, guardian, queen, symbol of male fear, banner of female power. Every age has reached into the same name and pulled out the Medusa it needed, and every age has been certain it found the real one. So which Medusa is true? The oldest evidence knows only a face and then a monster with no reason. The victim everyone now quotes was written 700 years later by a poet with a poem to fill, and even he was only doing what we are still doing right now. The sources never agreed. What changed across 3,000 years was not Medusa. It was us. What we feared, what we were angry about, what we needed a woman with snakes for hair to mean. The myth is a mirror that turns the looker to stone, and maybe that was always the most honest thing about her. We will keep going back to the oldest sources on every god and monster the world has ever named, and asking the same question. Not what is the story, but who wrote it and why. This is Pantheon X, Global Mythology, investigated